please turn your attention to the screens for the Citizens Take the Pledge video.
%33% of Philadelphia adults
lack basic literacy skills.
That means about 370,000
Philadelphians will struggle to read this sentence.
23% of Philadelphians live in poverty. That is double the national average.
74% of residents with children said they heard gunshots over the past year.
And illegal garbage dumping costs Philadelphia more than $8 million per year.
But if there's one thing we know from our history, it's that these things are all fixable. Just consider
2020 voter turnout.
It was the highest it's been in 25 years here. You could even say we saved democracy.
Public art, Philadelphia has more of it than any other city.
84% of our homes have high-speed internet access, up from just 70% in 2019.
The COVID-19 vaccine.
Our scientists invented it.
Philadelphians feel this city
It's still a good place to live.
A good place to live.
The city is still a good place to live.
And our best days are ahead.
What will it take to get us there? All of us.
I am more than a resident of Philadelphia.
I am its citizen.
and I dedicate myself
To the betterment of my home.
I will stand while others sit.
I will stand while others sit.
I will speak when there is silence.
I will read.
I will act.
I will vote.
I will challenge authority and challenge myself.
I will grow and learn.
I will seek out inspiration.
And I will become an inspiration to others.
I stand for Philadelphia.
It is my home.
And I am its citizen.
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 Welcome, everyone. I'm Larry Platt from the Philadelphia Citizen, and that was our hype video to try and get people excited about saving our city. Yeah, let's hear it for a bunch of us are fed up by high-fiving when we get reports of 23% voter turnout. So your appearance here tonight is a testament to we're going to turn that around. Welcome to our second and final round of our Ultimate Job Interview series. We look at this as yet another example of building the army of citizens committed to reinvigorating democracy here in the American city where it was born. You know, the dynamic mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, has said that the 19th century was the century of empires. The 20th century was the century of nation states, and the 21st is the century of cities and mayors. And I bring that up to underscore the importance of this act of citizenship of yours is tonight. Functional cities don't just happen. They're the product of intentional policymaking and vision and leadership. And that's what we'll be testing for tonight. We'll be diving deep into economic development issues, who can grow jobs, in an effort to discern who is most qualified to be the CEO of this $6 billion corporation that is the city of Philadelphia. And we want to do this with you, so we've crowdsourced an actual job description for mayor with responses from I exaggerate this number every time I talk about it, but I think it's like 46 of 48 zip codes throughout the city, and you can check it out through the QR code on the card you've been given. And if you want to ask a question later on tonight, write it on that card and pass it. We'll have world-class all-star interns going around to collect them, and our moderator tonight will read select questions to the candidates towards the end of our program. Before we get to our moderator and panelists, a bit of housekeeping. First, big shout out to our partners and our sponsors. Every Voice, Every Vote is this wonderfully innovative program put together by the Lenfest Institute for Journalism. It is all these forums that you're seeing night and day They're behind many of them, and it is a testament to big city democracy and problem solving. Diversified Search Group, the nation's oldest woman-founded and woman-run executive search firm, founded by that force of nature, Judy von Seldenik. I will remind you that a few weeks ago, Judy penned a piece in the Citizen about why, after 99 dudes, Philadelphia deserves a female mayor. If you haven't seen that, Maria's psyched about that one. If you haven't seen that one, check it out. And our other sponsor tonight, 6ABC, and its fearless leader, Bernie Brzezinski. A great debt of gratitude to him and to Channel 6. You know, who here has not grown up with that theme song embedded in our heads? I was once in a bar in Key West watching an Eagles game, not knowing that I was surrounded by expats until during a timeout, the bar erupts in the theme song, and drunken expat Philadelphians run around the bar carrying an Eagles flag. That is the Philadelphia diaspora. And that is the brand of Channel 6. And finally, our host here tonight, the Fittler Club. Really one of our city's crown jewels. So if this is the only room you've seen, you should check the place out. There's a world-class restaurant, a movie theater, a pool, a workout facility. It's my home away from home, which might not be a good sell. But please check it out. Now to our panel. I'm honored to introduce the legendary Channel 6 anchor, Jim Gardner. Jim is now the busiest retired person I know. And thank you for agreeing to be here tonight, Jim, and for your unparalleled service to this community. Man, you ought to run for office. Joining Jim in asking questions of our candidates tonight will be Della Clark, President and CEO of the Enterprise Center. The Enterprise Center, you know, for more than 30 years, the Enterprise Center has promoted racial and economic equity by supporting the growth of diverse small businesses in our city. And she'll be joined by Bill Hankowski, former chairman, president, CEO of Liberty Property Trust, and president of the Philadelphia Industrial Development Corporation. Bill has forgotten more about the intersection of government and business and civic life than I'll ever know. So thank you, three. Since this is our last mayoral get-together before Election Day, I just want to highlight all of those whose hard work has helped pull off these events. I'm not always good at acknowledging the hard work that our team does, because I'm like, on to the next idea. Kind of like Mr. Magoo, if I'm dating myself. But at the Citizen, the unflappable triumvirate of Jessica Blatt Press, Corey Moscow, and Ralph Thorne, with their team of super interns, as well as the leadership of Roxanne Patel-Shepelavi and Lauren McCutcheon, and the social media stylings of Olivia Cram. At Fittler, a big shout out to Tricia Maloney, Erica Banks, and the rest of their all-star team. Finally, a big shout out to you guys. The crowds have just gotten bigger and bigger each week we've done these. You know, when I was a little boy, my dad used to take me to town hall meetings, and he used to say, "This is democracy in action. This is people demanding control over their lives, which in most of the world they don't have." And I leave here after all of these events we do together just sort of so full of gratitude for you guys for coming out, for giving voice to the affairs of state in Philadelphia. And you really are doing what my dad said 40 years ago, which is not settling for outsourcing leadership of your hometown. So let's hear it for you. Applause. Give yourself a round of applause. And finally, here's how tonight will go. First, our lineup of candidates. We invited all the major candidates. Derek Green was out of town and thus could not attend. Sherelle Parker committed to participate, and we learned this afternoon that she'd had a change of plans. Each candidate will be on stage individually in an order predetermined backstage and interviewed by our panel for 15 minutes each. After all have gone, they'll all come up for the opportunity to ask a question or questions of one another before responding to some of your questions. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce a true gentleman and a civic icon, Jim Gardner. Thank you all very much.
Thank you so much, Larry. So I'm going to find out whether I can still do this. I'm not sure. It's been a while. So why don't we get started? Our first candidate for the evening, Maria Quinones. Maria Sanchez. Ms. Quinones-Sanchez, it's good to see you.
Thank you. Good to be here with the legend.
We are going to ask you some questions tonight, and I'm going to start off. I must say that this afternoon I was doing a lot of ruminating whether I was going to ask one question of all the candidates and then a second question that would be different. I've decided, no, I'm not going to do it that way. I'm going to ask individual questions to all the candidates, but if you have time after answering my questions and want to go back to questions that have been asked previously during the evening, that will be fine with me. But let's start. Ms. Quinones-Sanchez, compared to its peer cities, Philadelphia has the highest poverty rate, the highest taxes, the poorest post-industrial job creation performance, the highest homicide rate, and a school system accused of failing to adequately equip non-college bound graduates with the skills necessary for today's middle-class job market. What is your vision for Philadelphia and its effort to become a more effective and dynamic jobs generator over the next 10 to 20 years? And what is the most important thing, the singular most important thing that you can do as mayor to get us there?
Thank you. That's a loaded question. I will try to get to it. First, by starting with reminding folks that I have lived all those adversities that you have mentioned. You know, a child of public housing, first in my house to go to college, went to high school and was told by a counselor I was not college material, changed to a career technical education school, still went to college. I have lived all of those adversities. And everything I've done to this point has been about challenging the systems that perpetuate those obstacles that I see. Some government formed by our lack of investment in people and neighborhoods. Some formed by systemic racism that we've had, whether in the private sector or public areas. But what would I do and what am I talking about that's different given that lived experience? For me, I got engaged in the tax policy conversation from day one. I am the one person running that has created transformative business tax reform change to really target small businesses, small black and brown businesses, the manufacturing sector. 73,000 small businesses don't have a city liability because of the work we did. Manufacturers who make things in the city and sell them outside the city save $60 million a year. That was the beginning. I want to finish that work and ensure that we eliminate our net profits tax that really stops businesses from growing, capitalizing in the work that they're doing. Additionally, I want to create transparency in the tax system. It has to be predictable. People should know what the cost of doing business is in the city, and they should be as profitable as they want. We want to make sure that anybody who's in the city accessing our market are paying their fair share. education becomes key. Inquirer said our plan was the most comprehensive education plan. I'm calling for free community college for our high school juniors and seniors. It is more efficient to put them in community college than to keep them in an underperforming school. Using community college as our workforce development arm for returning citizens, helping young people get that career technical experience that they need so they can get licenses and they can go right into a job, a paying job. And then, you know, how we build out this city will determine what kind of city we are, and ensuring that as we feel the public safety challenges, we can make neighborhoods safe in how government utilizes its $12 billion budget, its $6 billion operating budget. We can make cities safe. You know, it's lights, camera, action. Folks, it is the simple things that can make every single neighborhood feel safe. Collecting the trash, eliminating blight, repurposing blight. I have been the most aggressive in leveraging public land for public good, whether it's side lots, gardens, small businesses. How do we repurpose some of our businesses? So, and then finally, I'm the only one calling for zero-based budgeting. We need to have a budget that's a value statement that speaks to core values, and that every department says, what's your anti-poverty plan? What is your public safety plan? What is your inclusion and economic plan, right? And so that every department sees its value added to making our city grow and prosper for people and for business.
So we started this clock as I was talking about the process, my process. So I'm going to add a couple of minutes to this, if you will. Is that all right, Jess? Thank you. As you are aware, the hot microchip war is erupting between the US and China. And suddenly it seems that companies are building microchip manufacturing plants in America, so we're not totally dependent on South Korea and Taiwan. So far, various companies are expanding or building massive $100 billion plants in places like Columbus, Colorado Springs, Syracuse, and North Phoenix. If you Google chips and Ohio, you get a story about how the CHIPS Act will fund a new plant in Columbus. If you Google chips and Philadelphia, you are directed to information about Hearst potato chips. That's true. No disrespect to that great company, and Utz as well. But there is a reason. Is there a reason why Philadelphia shouldn't lead an effort to convince an Intel or a Qualcomm to consider the Philadelphia region? Would this be on your job's agenda, and what would your blueprint be?
So in the post-COVID world, the reality is people can choose to be located anywhere in the world. As I talked to business folks in this campaign, folks said, I'm not even competing anymore for bricks and mortar situations. This is about people need to be in a city that provides them with a lifestyle and culture and all those other things. But that said, that goes key to where I started my work in council. Manufacturing, and we're here with the expert, Bill Hankowski, this is so unfair. What we have done in the city of Philadelphia is we have created disincentives for how companies like that can get started. You see Ohio, you see Camden, New Jersey, roll out the red carpet and say, we're going to align regulatory issues for the kind of warehousing space. And then if you want to be competitive in a global market, that net income tax, if you're penciling at 1 or 2% and you're paying a 6.5 net profits tax, you're not coming here. That's why eliminating it the way we did through the single sales factor made sense. We saved about 100, 150 allied manufacturing jobs by saying you're not operating in the Philadelphia region. We are a day's drive from 75% of the population with an international airport. We have to think very big, but they need regulatory alignment and they need predictability.
Thank you so much. Della Clark.
Hi, Maria.
Hello.
Yes, you can relax. I'm not going to ask you questions like Jim did.
I was more nervous because he's a legend, you know. My mom's going to see this.
So I know that in some of our previous engagements, you've talked about commercial corridors. You just mentioned it a few minutes ago. And so as we look at the city of Philadelphia and our public safety issue, my personal belief is that some of our commercial corridors are incubators of criminal activity. So as we think about neighborhood transformation and these corridors are the front door of our neighborhoods, how would you envision as mayor invest in dollars that we can change the front door of these communities as well as remove the criminal activity on these corridors?
Yeah, no, the next mayor gets to build out the city over the next 10 years. And if we're going to say that we're open for commerce all over the cities, these commercial corridors are lifelines for people. People, when we talk about walkable neighborhoods, commercial corridors become key. Again, I go back to the lights, camera, action. We have 4 different departments running camera programs. I have called on a CCTV London style. You can't get in a cab with somebody, without somebody saying you're being recorded. That is key. Lighting, LED lighting, branding. And then the most important thing, Della, is when we're gonna go invest in corridors, we call it an expense in the city. We gotta change that mentality. We are investing in infrastructure and then human capital. And what would I do? Direct grants for businesses willing to locate, right? As we're transforming these neighborhoods, the here and now, right? With an emphasis to Black and brown businesses. What is it that we need? The coffee shop, the flower shop. What is it that completes a neighborhood feel around its walkability, dining, all of those options? And if you're willing to locate in one of these neighborhoods, and then branding them. When we bring conventions downtown, we should be taking them all over. I was talking to a restaurateur the other day, and I asked him, what's your favorite restaurant? And he told me Tio Pepe on Castor Avenue. I almost jumped out of my seat. We have those. We need to uplift them, right? And we need to make sure we share them. But branding neighborhoods for culture, language, style, food, I think it's going to be key to transforming neighborhoods.
As a follow-on question, one of the things that we have determined is that many of the buildings that are located on the corridor are not owned by the operator of the business that's in it, right? And so, you know, if you own your own building, you're going to go out in the morning and sweep trash. You're going to pick up. If a window's broken, you're going to get it repaired. But when you don't own your building, those things do not occur. As mayor, what would you do to make sure that businesses on these corridors own their building so that they would care for it? And my second follow-on question is around grants. One of the things I'm on a mission to do is change some of the narrative here in Philadelphia, right? So when I put the word grant in front of an entrepreneur, a for-profit business, it projects a subsidy. When I think what I'd like to see us project is investment capital. Mm-hmm. So how can we combine ownership on these corridors with investment capital to be able to change the narrative in our city?
So that's really important because one of the tax reform initiatives I did was on use and occupancy tax, which is one of those little taxes that if you're a small operator, you're paying, right? And how do we transform those so they become owners? It's an investment in capital for them to buy their buildings, right? If you're located in a corridor where we want you to stand, just like we're doing first-time home ownership opportunities and saying we want increased home ownership, we should be doing the same for small businesses, particularly small businesses that provide opportunities. Look, we still have businesses all over the city where people live upstairs. That's what you want. That's what's going to make a corridor clean. When I used to represent town L stops, you get on the L, every second, third floor is vacant because we don't have a strategy. We need to create a strategy that says you want to live and work in this environment.
I'm not Jim, so I can't add 2 more minutes on. But my question is around city procurement, right? So as you know, having headed up appropriations for council, the minority and diverse founders are not getting 25 to 35%. As mayor, what would you do that you saw did not occur as head of appropriation that you would do differently to make sure that diverse founders in this city increase their opportunities?
I hosted many hearings. In fact, Rebecca was CAO at many of those hearings when we were looking at the procurement process that I believe the fix is always in. You gotta debundle contracts. Stop regulating minority contractors to be subs when they can be primes. Help them grow so that they can be prime. Take the regulatory issues around them. When you say to someone, you cannot bid for this because you're not big enough because we're not allowing you to grow, right? So debundling is hugely important. And then paying on time. We pay people up front for certain projects when we want to and we deem them important. If we believe inclusion is important, then we need to stop cash flowing government on the backs of these small contractors. So debundle. And then lastly, you cannot be a responsible bidder if you have a delayed project, right, and you're not meeting your numbers. And I will stop contractors from being able to continue to procure more contracts when they don't meet their obligatory compliance issues with their first contracts. So we have a full plan for that.
All right, Bill?
Thanks.
Thank you.
Maria, first, thank you for your public service. I always respect people that have given so much time to this city. I want to take you to sort of think about something not quite in a Philadelphia context, though I'm going to use a couple Philadelphia facts. So Center City, Philadelphia, Paul Levy just came out with the most recent numbers. So we're still 62% in terms of activity where we were. We are at 47% occupancy in terms of people in office buildings, and SEPTA's running at 55%. But we're not alone. I mean, it's Boston, it's New York. There is a theory that cities are having an existential crisis because of remote work, and you mentioned it earlier. At that level, it's sort of the level of where's the world going. As a mayor, how would you think about remote work, and how would you think about what should we as a city and a government be doing to keep the vibrancy we had that we currently don't have?
Yeah, that's an important question, you know, and first, you got to lead by example. You got to get city workers to come back. We can't tell IBX, Comcast, and everything, buy breakfast and lunch and get your workers back, and we don't have a strategy. And look, some form of hybrid work is here to stay. If you want to keep employees, you're going to have to offer that flexibility. But leading by example is hugely important, and saying, this is the policy, let's get folks down here. But the reality is that we're going to have to do more conversions from commercial to residential. There's no way people start renewing their licenses in Class A, Class B space, right, and don't see themselves, you know, cutting down on some of their space. So what does a more robust residential community offer in Center City, if not for the cultural, the tourism, all of those other things, right? It's the lifestyle that we have to sell. So yes, safety is important, right? We don't have I talk about the camera program because it boggles my mind that we don't have a camera program in the city of Philadelphia that makes people in the center core that makes them safe. And then SEPTA. We gotta clean SEPTA. I represented 10 L-stops. People are not going to come downtown, whether it's SEPTA or the PAPCO line, if they don't feel like they're clean and they're safe. And that is not only SEPTA's job. The city really has to work with SEPTA with what it is allowed with COVID. So we're gonna have to offer incentives. You know, I'm a great believer in mixed income housing. I believe we're gonna have to create a bucket of incentives for developers to do the conversions. We're gonna have to look at everything, you know, everything we've done from bonus to some of the abatement, you know, extend some of the preservation abatement. People do new build versus preservation because preservation is not predictable. So in the conversion process, we have an opportunity to create a tool. And then we need to leverage some of the financing pieces around what we're going to do. But this is a 10-year plan now. Washington, D.C. has just embarked in one where they've said, we want people back, and what are we willing to do with it? Public transit is huge, and a toolbox of incentives is going to be key.
That's great, thanks. Let's talk about government. You know it so well. So I'm just interested from your perspective, if you're a business person, the experience, whether it's getting a permit, getting a construction permit, literally getting the right to close a sidewalk, doing all of that is very long, very unpredictable. and therefore puts you at great peril with a business that are often just at the edge. So as a mayor, what do you want to do to make the government effective for a business person, whether they're in Roxborough or in the 5th District or whether they're downtown?
Yeah, it's very important. I encourage people to go to mariaforphilly.com because I think we have also the most extensive plan in this space. When COVID hit, the real estate market was at a standstill. Planning Commission wasn't up, the zoning board wasn't up, CDR wasn't up, and the building community called me. And in 6 weeks, we had everything up, right? Because I knew that, hey, COVID is happening. This is the time we need them building, and everybody was trying to beat the abatement deadline. So I demonstrated that I was able to pull government together. And what I saw there was people pulling at different directions. Permitting is about public safety. Permitting, as chair of L&I for 12 years, you request a permit, you submit a plan so that we ensure that you are licensed and you're doing it correctly. It's become the money thing now, right? We now have departments that count on this for money. So the incentive, that's why we have expedited fees, right? And then we use up your clock, right? I'm going to create a comprehensive business center where you enter in one place, and I'm not handing you a paper and saying, I stamped you, but now go to the water stamps you, but now go. We're not going to have that. If you're a barbershop, we know what your track is. If you're building a housing, we know what your track is. Whatever you're building, it's one track. Even the health department, who has its own permitting and has created this 150 steps to open up a food restaurant. They're operating off of a memo understanding from our permitting. One permitting, water, streets, L&I, health department. You have predictability. You're going to have a time period by which it gets done because this isn't complicated, right? And what we've done is we've computerized bad systems that only tell us quicker. We still have really bad processes.
I'm going to call on moderator prerogatives here for a second. You guys were talking about commercial corridors. If you go to 52nd Street, you will find that the vast majority of those businesses are owned by white people. And in fact, Philadelphia has the lowest rate of black-owned businesses of its peer cities, Boston, Washington, New York. How do you change that as mayor of Philadelphia?
Well, just like we were talking about first-time homeowners, we're going to have to provide grant and subsidies, and sometimes loan capacity using PIDC and other models. PIDC now has a very robust program. But if you're running a business, you don't have $100,000 to put on a deposit to buy your building, right? So we're going to have to subsidize that in ways and create product lines so that folks can say, I'm buying my building, and let's initiate that loan process. And we have to do it in a way that is very intentional and focused, again, around neighborhood amenities, those stores that can be owned by entrepreneurs, returning citizens, and others in the city of Philadelphia. It doesn't, look, we invest $50,000 to create jobs, when you average out our investment in the money we do. $50,000 for a small business, whether it's Lancaster Avenue, 52nd Street, or Frankfurt Avenue, makes a huge difference. And making sure we're not setting up small businesses for failure. The other thing that I want to add, I would end the double taxation that we do for businesses in their first year of business. You operate 1 year and you have to pay 2 years of taxes. That is a bad accounting practice where we manage our money on the backs of small business. I would eliminate that.
Ms. Quinones-Sanchez, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is Rebecca Rhynhart in the house?
Hello. I think there was some announcement about water just now. I did not know what it is, but I heard people's phones going up.
What is it?
Okay.
Well, let's take advantage of every minute. So there are many ways to measure Philadelphia's economic standing. One is to point to the number of Fortune 500 companies that are headquartered within the city limits. That number is 4. Forgetting about New York's 43 and Houston's energy-inspired 21. It is disheartening that Irving, Texas, Pittsburgh, Boston, even Cincinnati and Minneapolis are way ahead of us. So forget Fortune 500 for a second. Attracting big-time, big-name companies is a big deal. You would agree, I know. Let's say, for instance, hypothetically, there is an $8 trillion privately owned financial advising firm in, say, Malvern, and you desperately want to recruit that firm to the city. What is your plan? What is your pitch?
Well, thank you, Jim, and it's wonderful to be here this evening. Attracting great business is incredibly important to the city of Philadelphia. And in order to do that, what we need to do, and what I would do as mayor, is to improve the ease of doing business in our city. That involves cutting down on the red tape. That involves reducing the tax structure, wage tax, business income and receipts tax. We need to make the environment friendlier for business. Too often in Philadelphia, the attitude is one that business is somehow the enemy. My view is that business is a partner because we need good paying jobs, and attracting good business is the way for good job growth and career growth. So to pitch that company, I would say, as mayor, I welcome you. I am working every day to make our city more business friendly, safer, cleaner, and I welcome you to come into our vibrant downtown.
And if the CEO or the leaders of that company would say to you, yeah, I mean, I get it, that's sort of obvious and nice. You want to be safer, you want it to have, less taxes, but I need something specific. I need you to convince me to come into Philadelphia. You're looking that person in the eye and you're saying what?
I'm saying our city is an amazing place. We are in between New York and DC. We have transportation routes up and down the East Coast. We have a more affordable cost of living than those other cities. We have arts and culture. We have amazing sports teams and restaurants. We are a world-class city. And as mayor, I welcome you here to see all of that and to build in the future of our city together.
All right, let's talk about the tax story. Everybody seems to be suggesting that Philadelphia's tax structure is somehow an impediment to doing good business here. For those folks who are not completely aware of the tax situation in Philadelphia, Arizona State University, for instance, did a study that said Philadelphia is not a good place to do business. The study ranked Philadelphia 71st out of 80 cities for the ease of doing business. And it talked about the Philadelphia tax structure. The BERT uniquely imposes levies on both profits and sales. The infamous wage tax, the highest in the country. Jerry Sweeney of Brandywine Realty put it this way: there is no question that our tax structure is a gating issue to us growing jobs. So I ask you, rather than the infinitesimal reductions that have taken place, do you have a vision for a new tax structure in Philadelphia that will communicate to companies we're open for business?
I do have that vision, and as part of my business growth policy and plan that I released, I called for reductions in the wage tax and in the business income and receipts tax. As you mentioned, we ranked 71st out of 80th on the Arizona State University study. That study looks at the ease of doing business and the tax structure. And as chief administrative officer of the city and as city controller, I saw firsthand all of the stumbling blocks and issues that businesses had to go through to deal with revenue, L&I, streets, health, all the siloed nature of the departments. So I would break down those silos, and that doesn't cost the city anything. That's about good management and leadership, and I would do that. On the tax structure, we must lower the wage checks, lower the business income and receipts, because we're only one of 4 cities that double taxes, gross receipts, and net profits. But we can't do that on the backs of property tax. We can't keep raising property tax the way we've been raising it over the past few years when our schools are not getting better. So as mayor, what I would do would be to look at the city's budget, and I know the city's budget inside and out from being the city's budget director for 5 years. I would look at the budget and make changes to improve the efficiency of how the city government does business. As city controller, I estimated that the city could easily save $40 million a year by just managing overtime the way it did 5-6 years ago. There are many areas. My office did a police audit, which showed that out of a little under 6,000 officers, only 2,500 are on patrol. The rest are in specialized units or doing desk work. We need management and leadership. That's the way we're going to find the savings necessary to lower those business taxes. And at the same time, I'll work every day to fix our schools, to make our schools better.
Thank you. Della.
Rebecca, I'm in a hurry. So how long would it take in your first term as mayor for us to see some of this action and this vision that you just described to Jim?
Well, the mindset change would be day one. I would start day one as your mayor saying, this city is open for business. I am going to make it safer, and that starts on day one. And also, I will work right away within the first budget cycle to figure out operational improvements to propose a budget that has those tax reductions. This is not something that Philadelphians can wait for. We must have immediacy with this. Our city is in a critical, critical moment, and we can all see this. On day one, I would stand there and say, we need to make our city safer. That's the first thing to attract business. We need consequences and rules. This doesn't mean that we can't have compassion for those who need it. Absolutely. But we must have safety. And that's what I'll bring as mayor. Not going backwards to racist and unconstitutional policies, but not the chaos of now. We must move forward in a way that is safety and has justice. That is the first step to improving our city and bringing businesses back in.
So I want to follow up on my comments around changing the narrative in this city. I hear so many times the word affordable, okay? I think that we have become a city that is permanently subsidized to the residents. And I do not hear very much about middle class, creating wealth. And so, as you know, my work is around small business and entrepreneurship. The same speed you just described, your first day in office, what would you do to overhaul OEO office so that it is a wealth creation model for new jobs in this city versus running programs?
So the Office of Economic Opportunity has a hugely important mission, but is not staffed or given the empowerment to do the job that it needs to do. And as mayor, I will have OEO reporting directly into the mayor's office. I will make sure it's adequately staffed. I will set a goal that 40% of city contracts need to go to diverse businesses, and will make OEO responsible for technical assistance and other help to grow Black-owned business. At the same time that I will be using an equity model similar to and basically wanting to work with what you do at Enterprise Center to put equity into Black-owned business.
Okay, so again, I'm going to correct you on the narrative. Technical assistance does not eliminate the pain points of small business. Sure. It talks about the work. What we need to do is bring real expertise, and that's not technical assistance. So one of my other lingo changes in linguistics is to change the word from technical assistance to business support services.
Okay. Duly noted, it will be changed on our website tomorrow.
All right. All right. My final question is around the balance sheet, which you know very well. And working with small businesses, as I was talking to Maria about, when they are on commercial corridors and do not own their own building, rent does not build the balance sheet. Equity, when you own your own building, build the balance sheet. So as mayor, what would you do to really help small businesses build their balance sheet so that they can go to banks, CDFIs, and borrow money, as well as attract investment capital?
We need, as a city and as a society, to invest and put equity into Black-owned business. We all know the issue, which is that African-American-owned business have not had the same access to business loans, to insurance, to opportunity, and we need to fix that. As part of my report I put out on the American Rescue Plan money as city controller, I suggested that the mayor take a portion of that money and put it into an accelerator type program to invest in Black-owned business. Recent studies have shown I read 24th in the nation on percent of Black-owned businesses, and we're after Charlotte, Washington, Baltimore, DC. We as a government need to be very strategic and intentional, and as mayor, I would put money aside, and we do have money from the American Rescue Plan. The mayor didn't listen to my recommendation, but as mayor, I can actually make that change happen. That's why I'm running for mayor, to actually control things and make things happen. So that is something I absolutely will do. I want to more than double the number of Black-owned businesses in our city in my first term. We can do this. It's going to be transformational, but it needs strategic and intentional funding.
My final comment, this is just a comment, is just be careful as you think about your vision in that many programs suppresses income and wealth. And we need to remove that barrier from creating middle class and wealth in this city.
Absolutely, and I look forward to working with you, hopefully.
Bill Hankowski.
Thanks. And again, Rebecca, thank you for your service over the years. I want to start, I do not want to talk about the Sixers arena, but I do want to ask a question about big projects. So, and this is a little bit, maybe I am getting a little too old. I worry whether this city has the capacity today to execute a new convention center or to build new stadiums in South Philly, as was done years ago. I mean, and it's the issue of balancing the city's interests against neighborhood interests. It's the issue of mayoral prerogative against councilmatic prerogative. And so if there is a vision for something that needs to happen in this city, how would you, at governing, I'm talking now about management style and governing and philosophy, try to execute something balancing the city's interests with neighborhood and local interests as the mayor?
One of the most important roles of the mayor, in my view, is the role of convener. And I've done this throughout my career at the city, which is convene leaders and stakeholders that have very different interests, whether they be activists and business owners, or whether they just are at different ends of the political spectrum. As mayor, I would bring together the Sixers and the residents of Chinatown and the area to talk about what the project could look like. And I know you said you didn't want to talk about the Sixers, but for any large project, what it would look like and how could we get it done? And maybe the answer is we can't. Maybe the answer is yes, we can. But the role of the mayor is to have a sense of vision, to bring the parties together, to say, can we do this? Can we do it in a way where the community feels okay? Can we? Because it creates a large number of jobs and could be great for the city, but we can't force something on a neighborhood. We've done that too much in history. We cannot do that. But as mayor, I do think that I would have that power, authority, and have results from that.
Different topic. I think we've sort of inadvertently, as a city, made a decision that in 2026, we've invited the world. So we're going to host the World Cup. We're going to have an all-star game. I think there's WrestleMania, and there's probably a couple other things. I'm a little nervous, and I wonder, like, as mayor, I wonder whether this community generally, how organized we are to welcome the world. And how do you think about that, and how might you be thinking about that in your first term? Because it's coming actually relatively quickly.
Yeah, 2026 is going to be a very big year with the World Cup and America's birthday celebration. As mayor, I would be working every day to get the right people together to make sure that we're getting ready, to make sure that the city is cleaner, safer, and that we have a plan to show off every neighborhood of our city. We're going to be ready because we have to be ready, because we are going to be able to show off our city in an incredible way, and we've done big things before. The city of Philadelphia has done big things before, and as mayor, I would be there every day, leading the city, showing that we can do this. We need a mayor that is there every day, working, doing the hard work with the courage, and we can do it. We absolutely can do it. We're a great city.
I want to go back to sort of an aspect of a question that Jim asked, which is this whole issue of competition. As actually Larry in his intro talked about, it's really now a world of city regions. So the competition, many of the attributes in your answer to Jim are actually regional attributes. So how do you see a mayor as the leader of this region trying to compete nationally, internationally for all kinds of activity that may or may not land here? Do you think that's a priority in your administration? How would you work with our suburban neighbors? A little thought about that.
So the city of Philadelphia and our suburban neighbors are all partners. We depend on each other more than we think. People who live in the city work in the suburbs. People who live in the suburbs come into the city for dinner. We're all one region. And in my view, in order to be tremendously successful, we have to work together. We have a regional airport, we have SEPTA, and we have to fix all that. And we need to work together to get some of these larger companies. We have a growing life science industry here with Spark and all of the other companies that are building in West Philly. I would want to be a partner with the counties. And plus, being a partner with the counties helps us at the state. So there's strategic significance to that as well. And I've done that in the past. I've been to the other county chambers of commerces to speak as the city controller. I've reached out and made connections in the suburban counties, and I would just amplify that as mayor.
As you welcome the world in 2026, is there something as mayor you can do about baggage claim at the airport? Otherwise, the world may get back on a plane and go home. I mean, the airport is a city-owned facility.
So I think part of the plan, in all seriousness,
I'm being serious,
would be working with the airport and American Airlines. American is a big employer and stakeholder in the city of Philadelphia to make sure that we are all ready. This isn't just about having city streets clean, it's about all the different partners, including the airport and baggage claim.
Rebecca Rhynhart, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Jeff Brown, do you want to come up? Good evening. Just like Penn State, you travel well. You know. So Bill didn't want to talk about the Sixers arena. I would like to talk about the Sixers arena. The Sixers are going to great lengths to convince Philadelphians that their plans for a new arena would be an economic bonanza, starting with 9,000 construction jobs and an engine for economic activity in what has become a rather dormant section of town. Your potential constituents are starting to line up on both sides of this issue. Religious leaders in the African American community last week came out passionately in favor of the Sixers arena. And of course, the Chinatown community has basically said it will do everything it can to prevent its ultimate construction. I think the voters in Philadelphia deserve to know on which side you stand, given the enormous stakes of this enormous vision. Where do you stand?
So just to add a little context to Bill's earlier question, we're against everything here in the city, and that is holding us back from making progress. So I have a tendency to want big projects, especially where the companies are coming without a handout to the city and are going to put billions of dollars in capital in, add a lot of union jobs in construction and development. So this is a project I would like to see happen, but I do agree that you have to address the legitimate concerns of Chinatown. And they have concerns about parking, they have concerns about traffic congestion, and I think there are probably answers to that, and they need to be addressed. If we could address the realistic challenges of this project, then this project should move forward. But if we can't, then that's another story, and the city should be willing to weigh in to help make this happen. I think it is good for the city. And that might be capping 76, bringing Chinatown back together, make it one Chinatown. That could create new parking garages, parks. You know, let's look at this bigger to try to make a big home run for the city.
The Sixers say that they can do this without asking for money from the city. It seems obvious that it will take hundreds of millions of dollars in state and federal money. SEPTA is going to have to, for all intents and purposes, rebuild the Jefferson Station. So there will be hundreds of millions of dollars in expenditures in addition to the Sixers spending a good deal of their own cash.
I agree with you.
So even with this kind of public expenditure, you would still be in favor of this project?
I lean towards it. But I think the way you do it is you can't ignore Chinatown's issues. They have to be addressed. Not the emotional ones, because we all get emotional. I'm talking about the real issues, like parking, congestion, those kinds of things.
Well, let's pursue that just a little further, because it seems like you are equivocating just a little bit. I don't mean, that's not supposed to be funny, but do you think it's conceivable that you cannot solve Chinatown's objections, or is that something that you feel confident that you can take care of?
I think the objections can be solved. I really do. Parking can be solved with a big parking garage, and the Sixers should build a big parking garage or arrange for it to be done. There's failing parking conditions in Chinatown right now, and traffic conditions. And it needs to be addressed, and I think it can be done, and there will be a cost for it. But what's wrong is to have a big development that makes lots of people money and add an extra cost to an existing community. You have to address the problems.
Have you had conversations with leaders in the Chinatown community as a
I've
candidate?
actually met with all the parties. I've met with Comcast, with the Sixers, and with Chinatown to understand what the issues are, and this is right up my alley. I mean, everything I do is messy and looks impossible, and I usually figure out a way to solve it. And this would be a problem I'd love to get my hands on and try to work my way through it.
For years, we have talked about the difficulties of Philadelphia's working poor trying to move up to higher paying and therefore higher skilled jobs. And in almost every case, when you read about this, when you talk to people about it, one of the major obstacles seems to be that the Philadelphia School District has historically failed to teach these skills to their graduates who are not going on to college. Some have said that the Philadelphia School District has been so completely focused on trying to encourage their kids to go to college and to helping them get into college that they've neglected those who are not going to go to college, but who still have the potential of being members of the middle class and being very productive members of the Philadelphia community. What can a mayor do to not improve this situation, but to resolve this situation so the Philadelphia School District does its part in creating individuals who can take those higher skilled jobs?
So this question is right up my alley, because the reason I'm running for mayor is we're not fixing any problem in this city unless we address our structural poverty. We have excessive structural poverty. We're the poorest big city in the country. And our K through 12 strategy has caused a big part of the problem. And the problem is that somewhere around 75% or more of our young people don't have a plan to college, haven't gone to college for many decades. At the same time, we've diminished career and technical education. So we have looked down on it. We snubbed our nose on it. And there's more career and technical jobs today that pay more than ever in our history. If you talk to companies, this is what they're missing. They're missing people to do $50,000 to $100,000 a year jobs. We're completely off on this. Our strategy's off. We're arguing in the school district about things that aren't the problem. This is the biggest problem. And honestly, we're at a very good time to fix this problem. But before you fix a problem, you have to identify it. And this is a big problem, one of our biggest. But because of the recent Supreme Court case in the state, and the funding formulas up for discussion, we all think we're going to get more operating dollars, and that's important. But you know what? We might be able to get more capital dollars, and we need to rebuild these schools because we have a gaping problem of too many empty seats. If you think about it, and a grocer would think of it this way, a half-empty store wastes lots of money. We have half-empty schools. The schools have to be right-sized. We have to get rid of old boilers, asbestos, leaky roofs, no air conditioner, and they need to be built for career and technical education, specializing in industries where jobs exist right now for young people that make money. This could be one of the biggest interventions to really turn this city around. Thank you for that question.
Della.
How you doing, Jeff?
Good, my friend. How you doing?
Good. So I know that looking at your website and following you, you've created a lot of jobs. And I'm sure you understand the public sector and the philanthropic community that fund a lot of workforce development. As mayor, how would you recalibrate your lenses away from pushing workforce development through jobs versus making entrepreneurship a career option, like going through workforce development? I think in this city, we do not push entrepreneurship as a career option, right? While I appreciate jobs, doesn't always move you to middle class, right? And this city needs to create wealth. As mayor, what would you do to expedite this recalibrating of lenses?
So I appreciate the question. We're always going to need jobs, but if you really want to move us forward, we need more entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs from the neighborhood that create businesses and hire people in the neighborhood and create wealth for neighborhoods. And the truth of the matter is, the way we currently do it in K through 12 education, in workforce, returning citizens, we don't present an entrepreneurial option. And you know, this is where my wife and I have some really good firsthand experience. I created the PA 30-day fund with some of my colleagues to save small businesses, especially black and brown businesses. And I called them myself at night to talk to them. And these are entrepreneurs. And what came of that is our small business incubator, where we've created over 300 or helped over 300 small black and brown businesses. And when we sit and listen to these entrepreneurs, these are real entrepreneurs. I mean, they do need some business coaching. We have found that. And they do need some capital, especially equity. But these are real entrepreneurs. They remind me of myself and my family. They have hustle. They have ideas. There's one lady I can't get out of my mind. She's married with 3 kids. She has a full-time job. She has 5 patents with a very clever product for babies. And she's got all the hustle in the world. She should be big time. And we don't do anything to encourage that in this city. And we need to reform our thinking, just like you're saying, to pick out those people that are meant to be entrepreneurs and help them reach their potential. Because it will not only help them and create generational wealth for them, it'll help their neighborhoods, because they're going to hire people as they grow. So I think you're right on target. And you know, in my house growing up, I got a college education, but I got a college education at dinner too. My dad was an entrepreneur, and he taught me how to do things. And in a lot of cases, the business support you spoke of earlier, that's needed. Because when we meet with these young entrepreneurs, they often don't have their business set up properly, they don't have insurance, they often don't know their unit costs, they haven't been wise about managing their costs in general or have a plan to market their product. And these are not complicated things. We teach them that very quickly, and their business takes off. That's what I think we need to do.
So as a follow-on to your comments, what percentage of your business have you worked with small businesses for? And what's your largest dollar value contract that you've issued to a small business?
So in our business, we have entrepreneurs we work with. I also have some larger vendors, and I'm not sure what the percentage is, but the real magic is our entrepreneurs. When you walk into our stores, there's always an entrepreneur at the entrance trying to pitch you on their product and sell you their product. And we do have some that have been very successful. And Saudia Schuler is an example. She has a very successful food business in our Monument store, doing very large volume. She has a lot of potential. We have another entrepreneur that has healthcare inventions, not healthcare, exercise inventions, Noelle. And she has taken the original business we gave her selling her product. She's selling stores all over the country today. So the issue to me isn't just how much business I could give them. How could I unleash their abilities to make a large business that has transformational, generational wealth? And that's what we work on.
So I'm looking for jobs. Have these entrepreneurs you've given examples created any jobs?
Yes.
Could you give us a sense?
Of the 300, almost all of them have some employees. I could tell you that. There's a lady that makes banana pudding that she started with us, and now she's in Reading Terminal, and I think she probably has 24 or more employees working in Reading Terminal. I went to visit her. The place had lines there. And so I haven't kept track of all the jobs because we're a business. We're not a nonprofit or the government, but I see visible signs of success that excite me and give me an idea of what I would do if I were mayor of Philadelphia.
Okay. My final comment is around, you talked about this example of this entrepreneur who needed help with their numbers and didn't have capacity. What we have found is that oftentimes that is a lack of capital, right? Because when you start out and you have a rich uncle or you have assets, then you're able to surround yourself with the expertise to grow and accelerate fast. Oftentimes with diverse founders, they don't have they don't have the capital, right? So as mayor, what would you do to increase capital to help the businesses not only you've seen come through your stores, but in the city of Philadelphia in general?
Yeah, I think there's two important things, maybe three. One thing is we should create a social equity fund. The purpose isn't to make a return. The purpose is to incubate small businesses and help them grow. I do think they need business advice. My experience is the vast majority are missing basic principles to be successful, and we should be able to give grants or other forms of assistance to get them the advice so they don't make the mistakes you make when you don't have someone guiding you. And the third thing is we do need to simplify. We have very complex processes in this city. We need a massive overhaul of our processes. We should look at what other big cities do. We should commit ourselves to be the simplest city in the country to do business.
Thank you.
Bill Hankowski.
Jeff, let's try a couple different topics. Let's start with sort of this whole issue of the city's competitiveness. We can look at a variety of statistics. The city underperformed coming out of the pandemic. We underperformed our suburbs. We underperformed the country. If you look at over time, we're always in the bottom quartile somewhere in job growth. Many factors, but one factor might be taxes. So I'm interested in your views on tax policy, the tax environment, whether it's big business, small business. How do you, as a mayor, what do you think you're going to be doing over the next 4 years addressing that environment?
Yeah, let me start out with a place you wouldn't expect. I think the first question, if you're failing, and I would say in all measures, we're kind of failing as a city. We're one of the worst rated big cities in the country. What is wrong? Let's start out with that, because we would have to fix that to fix our tax problem. And there's two things wrong. One, we have way too many people in poverty that we have to help, and they can't help the city pay its bills. That's a huge, broken structural problem. And that's why that's where my head goes to the number one thing we have to address, because I don't realistically think we could dramatically change our tax policy unless we fix that. You can't have this amount of people that need help and have enough money to pay your bills. So that's one. The second thing is growth helps, and we don't grow. We have a very repressive economy. We're against almost everything. We're very bogged down in petty politics, and you said councilmatic prerogative, and there's all kinds of prerogatives in this city, why people don't want to agree to anything. We got to break through that. We need to grow the pie, and we need to get people out of poverty. After you do that, you will see how magnificently our tax structure comes into line. And if you don't fix those two problems, we're never getting it in line. Because most of the tax savings you could do will be very, very small. Jim said that. Because we're stressed out financially. We have a bad circumstance. We're upside down. If you compare us to other cities, we spend less per person. Less per person, even though we tax more because our circumstance is bad. And when you look at how would we start going down the path of growing the pie, incentives are a good option. Incentives to grow your existing business, incentives to relocate in the city, and you don't have to do corporate welfare. We could pay for performance. And what I mean by that is every incremental growth you have, the number of employees you have, how much revenue you have, how much taxes you pay is a benefit to the city. We should be more than welcome to share that benefit to accelerate that growth, and that growth will grow the pie and bring down our challenge tax-wise.
So just to stay on that for a second,
Yeah.
so you would envision in a Brown administration a pretty extensive incentivized program for business growth, new business relocating, that you think you could execute even with the uniformity clause, a mistake, you don't need enabling legislation. I mean, there's a lot that makes all that hard. As you know, there's enterprise zones, opportunity zones, and empowerment zones, all because it's actually quite hard to do that. Do you think you could do that fairly quickly and effectively?
I do. First of all, because of the business I do, I'm very familiar with all those things, and in some cases I've utilized those things to solve problems that I couldn't solve any other way. And uniformity, you can't charge people different tax rates, but you can have different incentives. And you know, one of the things we ought to think about, we are not going to be the best at everything. Nobody is. And we should pick where we want to own an industry or a growth area. And where my mind goes to as a starting point is our biggest problem is poverty. Industries in which you have lots of non-college educated jobs that pay well is where we'll get the best bang for the buck. So what does that look like? I would like to vertically integrate gene therapy and biotech. Not get another headquartered firm, get them to make the stuff here, get them to distribute the stuff here. Because we could train non-college educated people to do that job and they can make a good living. I love logistics because we're close to 75% of the US population. And I think there's probably 24 industries we're legitimately the best place in the US to be. And I wouldn't have any problem as mayor defending us and going to businesses and saying, let me explain to you why this is the best place in the country to be. Because yeah, we're a little higher on the taxes, but how much are we going to save you on fuel? Because the logistics cost. And how much are we going to save you on the cost of rent? Because our rents are much cheaper than the other big cities. And we actually have space for you to build world-class facilities. And I think that's how we build it. We can't be everything to everybody.
Different topic. So I think your workforce is unionized. You've gotten some support from unions, which is great. My dad was a shop steward, so I'm a fan of unions. But one could argue in Philadelphia that when you look at the cost to build something, it is higher than the suburbs. When you look at those cities that we compare our growth rates to, almost all the ones at the top are south and west and have lower cost to execute a project. Your thoughts about, and one of the issues is housing affordability in the city, which many factors, but one factor is how much it costs to build. Any thoughts about how you'd engage with the building trades, how you'd think about long-term the cost of being in Philadelphia from a union, non-union perspective?
Yeah, I think this is a really good question. And from the beginning of this process for me thinking about what could I do to bring massive improvement in the city, I thought, just like in the grocery business, at one point I met with my unions and I said, you know, I think we both should be looking for alternative employment, because if I'm the only union place left and everyone else doesn't have health insurance and pension, this is a surely fine way to go out of business, and we both should find another job. And we ended up working out a way to improve the productivity of what we did together. We did it together, nothing was forced, and we had a really magnificent outcome where we compete, my wife and I compete with the toughest, biggest companies in that business, and we win. The same thing has to be done with the city. And when I went to the city's unions, DC 33, TWU, the Teamsters, I gave them the same pitch. This is what we need right now, because if not, the next mayor's going to come in and say, you know, we should outsource the whole thing. And that's going to hurt a lot of everyday people that have good union jobs. We should be fighting for those good union jobs, and the way to do it, rethink how we do our business to be more efficient. Now, the unions that didn't endorse me are the building trades. And, you know, I do have concerns about the building trades. Our costs are too high, considering we're the poorest big city in the country. And, you know, there are other things about their business practices that I'm not a fan of. But like any other stakeholder, we'd have to work with them. To get this city turned around, we need some help from them. And it would be on my agenda to work on that.
You know, going back to Bill Green, every mayor has said, we're going to reduce the poverty situation in Philadelphia. Poverty rate was, I think, 20% under Bill Green, under Jim Kenney, and every mayor has said, we're going to launch a war against poverty. The poverty rate now is 26.3%, I believe. Why will you succeed when every mayor, going back to Bill Green, has failed?
I think this is the most important question in this election, and it's why I should be hired for this job. My wife and I hired 60,000 Philadelphians in our business over our career, people from the neighborhoods, often their first job. I was chairman of Philadelphia Youth Network, where I served 200,000 underprivileged young people from our neighborhoods. I'm chairman of the state workforce system, where hundreds of thousands of people were pulled out of poverty, and we have just about the lowest unemployment rate ever in our state. This is what I do. I have a lot of experience with returning citizens, with handicapped people. This is my expertise. And I have this because I grew up in two worlds. I grew up in the Northeast and I grew up in West Philly, and I've always worked with two worlds. And I understand both worlds, and I can help people out of poverty. It's what I know how to do. And I think it's the most important thing in this election.
Thank you, Jim. Appreciate it. Jess is going, you're letting them talk too long, Jim, be more, well, we're okay. Are we okay? We're okay. Okay. Allan Domb, thank you. We started talking about the building trades. I have a question that approaches it from a slightly different point of view. It's been written that the building trades in Philadelphia have an ugly history of excluding blacks and other minorities from their roles, keeping blacks, Hispanics, and Asians from good-paying, coveted construction jobs. Now today, the local building trades refuse to divulge their demographic information. But as reported by the Inquirer, the most recent data show that the union workforce is 76% white in a city that is 44% black. The Building and Construction Trades Council has its first African-American leader in Ryan Boyer. Do you expect to see a drastic change in minority membership, and how will you, what kind of oversight will you enforce in that whole issue?
Thanks for the question, Jim, and thank you, Larry Platt and the Citizen and our panelists for having me here tonight. I think there's really a different perspective here. I think, my goal as the next mayor isn't to keep people in poverty and make them comfortable. My goal is to take them out of poverty. And that has to be our goal, to take people out of poverty. So let's talk about the building trades. We have crime in the city. That's the number one issue, public safety. But crime is a symptom of all these other issues. Lack of good paying jobs, affordable housing, poverty, all those issues, education. The long-term solution is education. And Jim, you asked the question that since 1980, when Bill Green was mayor, we've never solved the poverty problem. And that's correct, because we've never tackled it for the long term. So here's my proposal on the education, and it blends in with building trades. We should start teaching in our schools financial literacy from kindergarten to 12th grade. We should start teaching in our schools technology, K through 12. We should teach Della entrepreneurship, K through 12. Teach these kids how to be entrepreneurs. Then we should allow kids in high school the option of working 1 day a week in a job and going to school for 4 days, get credit, get paid, get a summer job. And in this labor market, that employer will say to the student, hey, Alan, can you come in Tuesday through Friday after school and work, and get them off the street? I'm going to take it a step further. There's a high school called Cristo Rey. I love Cristo Rey at 17th and Allegheny. Cristo Rey last year, kids go to school 4 days a week. They work 1 day a week in a job. They graduated 99%, and 100% went on to college of Cristo Rey students. It works. This works. To answer your building trades question, we need to develop our high schools for specific trades and specific jobs. Think of the Philadelphia Phillies. They have 3 minor league teams, AAA, AA, and single A ball. We should start developing our high schools, maybe 3 or 4 high schools, and I've talked to the building trades about this, where in 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade, we teach our own students how to be bricklayers, how to be sheet metal workers, how to be plumbers and steam fitters and carpenters. And we coordinate with the building trades. We have a lot of retired people in the building trades who have tremendous institutional knowledge, tremendous. Have them come work with us and teach our kids how to go into the building trades with one requirement from the building trades. When they go through a 4-year program and they graduate, the building trades must offer them a job. So in 12th grade, they graduate, they get a job. We should do that with our public safety. We have a shortage of police, big shortage. We should have high schools dedicated to teaching our kids how to be police officers, how to be firefighters, EMT. And then when they graduate, you can become a firefighter and EMT. When you're 18, you got to do the cadet program at 18 and 19 for police, which Daniel Atlaw, our police commissioner, was a cadet. So was Charles Ramsey, former police commissioner. I could go on, but we should be using our schools as training grounds, which other countries are starting to do.
Are you comfortable that the culture of the building trades in 2023 is such that African Americans and Hispanics and Asians in Philadelphia will have an opportunity to fulfill their merit and fulfill their potential in one of the most important employment areas in the city of Philadelphia?
Well, right now, the numbers you just quoted are disheartening to me, okay? And we need to fix that. We need to sit down with the building trades and try to improve it. But when I was in council for almost 7 years, we kept hearing from the building trades that we don't have people in our system that are qualified for these jobs. What I'm saying is let's create the training so in 4 years from now, we have a different city. If we had done this 4 years ago, Jim, we wouldn't be sitting here today discussing this. We'd have a different city.
On one hand, the prospects of the Bellwether District on the site of the Energy Solutions refinery is exciting, given the prospect of 20,000 jobs that Hilco is promising. There's also a prospect, however, of enormous distrust on the part of surrounding communities, distrust that that property will be sufficiently decontaminated. What can you do as mayor to allay the fears of the surrounding community, and what kind of oversight can you impose on Hilco to make sure that that land is decontaminated?
First of all, as mayor, I would sit down with the executives of Hilco and make sure that's not going to happen. I would have maybe quarterly meetings with them. I'd have somebody from the city side tracking what's going on to make sure we're not going in the wrong direction. So we have to have more control. But I want to go back to a question, Jim, that you asked before, and that was, I believe, how would you attract business or employers into the city? Because when I look at this thing of jobs, 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 it really should say entrepreneurs and employers, because they're the ones who create the jobs. So let's go to the elephant in the room. You ready? Vanguard. Vanguard's in Valley Forge or out suburbs, somewhere out there. You need a passport to get out there.
I was making a veiled reference.
Okay,
to
I know
Vanguard
that.
earlier
But
this night.
Fidelity is in Boston, and Vanguard's out in our suburbs. What would I do? I would meet with the president. I think it's Tim Buckley, who used to be with Safeguard Scientific, some of those companies that were with Pete Musser. I'd set up a meeting with him, and I say, Tim, you need to open a large office in the city. We have the talent, because it's all about talent today. Companies will exist where there's great talent. And if we have the talent, and we do in the city, you need to open a bigger office. And I would also remind Tim that they are the sub of the herb. They're in the suburbs. We are the herb. All the fun, all the arts and culture are in the city, and that's how we can attract talent.
Della.
So, Allan, we've interacted a lot. I want to admit that. And so, a follow-up to your conversation with Jim around education. It sounded to me as if what you described was for in-school population. What will you do as mayor with the out-of-school population, okay? And how will you address their challenges that they face here in this city?
Sure, yeah, great question. And I'm going to address that and have a follow-up to a question you asked earlier also. I've said that I would have 25 locations across the city for adult education, set up in libraries, schools, or even churches, I don't care, where it doesn't cost us money for those locations that are already existing. I want to teach in those locations, whether it's 7 to 9 or 6 to 8 o'clock at night, financial literacy for adults, home ownership for adults, and home ownership for financial literacy for the kids in our schools. We haven't talked about that, but that is the key to generational wealth, home ownership. You know, the average tenant wealth is $4,000 to $6,000. The average homeowner is $200,000. 95% of the people in the United States, their biggest asset is their personal home. Many businesses are started by owning your home and borrowing against your home equity, basically, to open a business. So I would say I would want to teach financial literacy to adults with home ownership, technology, and Della, I want to teach adults entrepreneurship. Right now in the Black and brown community, I think it's 2 or 3%. Should be 15 to 20%. That's how you build generational wealth. Let me go back to something you mentioned about capital. You have a fund, if I recall, called Innovative Fund. Innovate, yes. As mayor, here's what I would do, and I don't understand why we don't do this. I think, if I know the numbers correctly, you're looking to raise $50 million, and I think you've raised about $29 million so far. Why are we not, as a city, taking some of our pension fund money and investing in ourselves? Because I've always been taught that the best investment is to invest in ourselves. By investing in those companies you're referring to with our pension money, not only are we helping people, but we're getting the taxes back, and we're doing it in the city of Philadelphia. So that would be one of my biggest goals, and I would do what Charlotte, North Carolina did. I don't know if you know, Charlotte raised $250 million, or their goal is $250. They were about $230 right now, and I think their program is with city money, matching a lot of private money, including banks and other donors. We should do that for small businesses and entrepreneurs in our community.
So I want to change, you know, I'm on a mission to recalibrate and change the narrative. You used the word financial literacy. I'd like to see you change that to financial intelligence.
No
Okay?
problem. Yeah,
All right.
no problem.
It resonates differently.
Financial intelligence.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And I don't care whether it's a pre-K, K, 6th grader, 12th grader. They need to understand financial intelligence.
Yeah, and you know, to that point, I don't know if you know, the Federal Reserve in Philadelphia has tremendous programs to teaching financial intelligence to teachers. And since I couldn't get the school district to do it, I put up a program when I was in council and sponsored 178 public school teachers to take the program at 6th and Arch. It was 4 days at the end of June where they learned financial intelligence and came back into the school system and taught it to our students.
I have one quick question, would like a quick response around wage tax and BRRT, right? As mayor, what would you do to reduce those two taxes, and how would you make up the revenue?
That's not a quick answer. I'm going to look at the clock and take 30 seconds, so I'm going to go really quick, okay?
All right.
So first of all, you should know the facts. And if you haven't figured it out yet, I like facts. 2009 to 2018 in the United States, all jobs created, jobs that paid less than $35,000, the percentage was 29%. In Philadelphia, the percentage was 60.5. We're double the average. When you look at jobs that pay 35 to 100, we're less than half of our suburbs. Look at Conshohocken and Devon and Valley Forge. They're like cities out there making $35 to $100,000 jobs by the tens of thousands. And then when you look at the top 20 companies, I believe it is 3 employers are private sector, 17 are eds and meds. Number 1 is Comcast. Thank God they're here. 11,500 jobs with a 4-to-1 job multiplier. They're responsible for almost 50,000 jobs in our city. Amazing. We need 10 more Comcasts. Second is American Airlines. Thank God they're here. Third is Allied Security, because of the guards they have to provide because of our security. And that is the number 1 issue, public safety. So to answer your question, when you look at the business taxes for entrepreneurs and businesses and employers, New York City's number 1 at 16.2, local and state combined. Philadelphia, after the net income was reduced, we're at 15.9. The third highest in the country is California at 8.8. And then it's Chicago and Boston around 7, and Atlanta's at 4. So if you're an existing business here, why are you staying here and expanding? Or why are you coming here under that kind of burden of taxes? It is the net income tax, which eConsult did a study on when I was in council, that showed after 10 years, if we can take that net income from 5.9 right now down to 0 in 10 years, we'll create 100,000 good-paying jobs. That's what we need to do. And when you asked the question earlier, where's the money coming from? The budget 8 years ago was $4 billion. The budget today is $6 billion. It went up 50%. And I also want to give a shout out to a colleague of mine, Councilmember Sanchez. She did something great for entrepreneurs. She excluded the first $100,000. That was her. She deserves a lot of credit for that, because that helped a lot of entrepreneurs.
Thank you.
Bill?
Thanks, Alan. Again, thank you for your public service. Let's stay on the competitive situation for the city. And we all know all these statistics. I mean, we're not doing a great job. But let's take a strength. So we've seen tremendous growth in the life science space, propelled by our academic institutions or research centers in that space. And we happen to be in a very good place at a moment in time. We've been in this place before and we've blown it. So as a mayor in the life science space, in terms of capitalizing on this unique opportunity this city has, how do you think about that? What do you think? Understanding taxes and all that, but that industry per se, how would you be active in that space?
So first of all, as mayor, you have to be the biggest champion and cheerleader of this city. Number 1, you have to be the biggest champion and the biggest cheerleader. So every potential biotech company or bioscience company or gene and cell therapy company, I'd want to meet with them myself. Whether I have to go to the airport to meet them or fly to their city, if they're going to bring jobs to our city, I'm going to be there to help our Commerce Department and others to help. I'm going to tell you a quick story, because I'm a big supporter of the life sciences. Back in May of 2021, you may have seen the announcement that Penn was moving about 150,000 square feet of gene and cell therapy space out to the suburbs. And I was like, I called Kevin Mahoney at Penn. And I said verbatim, Kevin, this is like putting a knife in my heart, taking these jobs out of the city, because they're so important to us, because those have high economic job multipliers. I said, what do we have to do to keep these jobs here? And I'm a council person asking that. He said, well, talk to Jim Wilson, who's head of gene and cell therapy at Penn. So I met with Jim. And Jim, great guy, met him for an hour and a half. He said, look, it was the space, it's the taxes, but it was really the space issues. So I set him up actually with Jerry Sweeney, because I said, let's have 500,000 square feet of a life science center out in West Philadelphia. Nothing happened. In May, I actually hosted a dinner myself, and I did this under the radar because Governor Rendell gave me great advice in 2015. He said to me, Alan, do as much work as possible and give out the credit. So with Jim Wilson, I hosted a dinner. This was in May of 22. We had 13 gene and cell therapy companies there and 13 Philadelphia developers there with one goal, doing it in the city. We were there for 4 hours. It was phenomenal. We had our commerce director there. We had past commerce directors there. We had some people from the chamber there. It was phenomenal. But what came out of that wasn't the taxes, wasn't the space. It was the talent. We don't have the talent. So the next day, and it was John Gattuso who gave me the idea, smart guy, John Gattuso. Next day I called John Fry. I said, John, how do we solve this problem? Could Drexel do this with community college? How do we build a life sciences college specializing in gene and cell therapy and maybe other fields? Because we'd be the first in the country to do this. And John, to his credit, said, I love the idea. I'm working on it. I helped him raise some money to make it happen, and they're working on it now with community college. Maybe they'll do it with Penn, I'm not sure. But my goal is to see that happen in our city. We'd be the first in the country. We have to get out of the mentality of letting Boston pick our pockets. And if we get this college open, we're going to go to Boston and pick their pockets and bring those companies here.
Let's go to another topic, which is governing. So, how would you govern as a mayor? So this question's aimed at that. You are on council. We have council, some of your colleagues here. We know that council has become a more active, powerful, weaker mayor. And one component of that is what's often called councilmatic prerogative. And so we see zoning overlays for those of you. So that's taking the building code and how you build a building. And council people by district have created overlays. I think we're unique, not a uniqueness we love, of being one of the only cities in America where by district council, there's a different zoning organization. Would you veto those bills? What would you do to bring some change in the direction of how this city gets planned, how it gets zoned, how we actually can go ahead and execute development?
So I'll give you an example, Bill. 39th and Market. 39th and Market was low-income housing, I believe, and there was a spot zoning put in that place there, and I voted against it. I voted against councilmatic prerogative. I think I was the only one who voted against it. But I voted against it because in the long run, if we do those things, what type of message are we sending to those potential people who are going to do affordable housing for the future? We're going to make it worse for us if we do that, because who's going to want to do affordable housing know that they get spot zoned, they'll never be able to redevelop that property. And so I voted against it. But I will say this, being mayor isn't about making the popular decisions. It's about making the right decisions for the city, not just for today, but for the next 10 or 20 years. So to answer your question, yes, I will go against councilmatic prerogative if it's not in the best interest of the city. I only care about the city. And I donate my salary to schools. I don't take any money. My love is for the city. And if there was someone else that I thought could do a better job than me, I would be supporting them today.
My next one is this whole question of competition. So we talked about life science, you going around the country and whatever. But it's the question I asked at the very beginning about sort of the existential crisis that cities are facing, and in a competitive sense. So have you thought much about remote working?
Yes.
And because if I'm that Comcast employee and I live in Fishtown and I used to take the L, and now I don't have to, I could literally move anywhere and get myself a raise. So how do you think about remote working and the city competing?
Well, I think Councilmember Sanchez said this earlier. It starts with government. We need to have our people come back to work. That's number one. Whether it's 4 days a week or for those jobs where we need them 5 days a week, we need to set the standard. And then number two, as the mayor, I would convene, for example, the top 20 or 25 law firms in the city and have a meeting with them all and say, look, you're all worried about making this decision because you're afraid this lawyer is going to skip to this firm versus if we all do this together, we can bring them back. And the problem is, the real issue, and this is in other cities too, like Boston, the biggest hurt we're seeing is in the office corridor from City Hall to 20th on JFK and Market Street. That's getting crushed because many of those people were suburbanites who commuted into those office jobs. What's thriving is Chestnut Street and South because it relies on residential. So for some of the B and C buildings, look, the abatement started back in '99 under Governor Rendell, Mayor Rendell, because we had B and C buildings that were empty. For some of those B and C buildings, can we convert them to residential? Maybe. I just saw recently that, I think it was Leo Adamondo, let a building go at 17th and Market because the numbers don't work. What we need to understand as a government is that a year ago, interest rates were half what they are today. And building costs have escalated, and so has labor. And I will say this about the abatement. People don't realize that the abatement is a tremendous housing affordability tool, and it's given the city a tremendous return. I know it's not popular to say that, but for every dollar of abatement, we get $2 back. But I'm gonna give you an example of a building I was involved with. I did the numbers. The Park Rittenhouse, where the restaurant is, above our condominiums. When that building was purchased back in '07, the real estate taxes were about $450,000 for that building. Today, they're over $2 million. I mean, it's actually a really good investment in the long term for the city to do this. I mean, this is why we have so much more revenue. A lot of those abatements burned off. So I do think we need to get people back, but I think the mayor needs to take a bigger role. Look, IBX hasn't committed yet. Comcast has to 3 days. The mayor needs to get involved, and we need that economic activity. 40% of the people who work in the city live in the suburbs. When they're not here, they're going out to the restaurants in the suburbs. They're buying their goods and services out there. They're hurting our neighborhoods. We need them back in the city.
Bob Iger made a few headlines by saying that he wanted all Disney employees to come into the office at least 4 days a week. Why can't employers and heads of law firms in Philadelphia do the same thing?
Well, I was just saying earlier, Jim, that I would engage all the heads of our law firms in a meeting and say to them, look, you need to stand together and have it 4 days or 5 days, whatever it is. And here's the thing. I don't care what anyone says. It's not the same having a meeting on Zoom.
No, it's not.
Than being in person. I don't care what you say. And if you're a new person, a college graduate or somebody getting a new job, how do you build a company culture? How do you build that without the interaction of people?
I can't let you go, and I know we're way over time here. I can't let you go without asking a question that many people in Philadelphia are thinking, whether rightly or wrongly, but they're thinking it. How can the condo king not be faced with enormous conflicts of interest if he were mayor of Philadelphia?
Well, it's a great question. And you would know this because I remember you used to live in Independence Place back in the 80s, okay? And Jim won't remember this, but he lived in a K apartment, 1,734 square feet, 2 bedrooms, 2.5 baths.
You're right. I don't remember that it was a K apartment.
Yeah, it was in the northeast corner of the Tower 1. Anyway,
there was no Tower 2 at that
That's
point.
right. You got a good view. That's right. So I have developed an ethics plan. I hired Claire Finkelstein from the University of Penn, who did President Biden's ethics plan. It's published on my website. I won't get into all the details. It is the gold standard. It basically takes me out of everything, and I step away from everything and sell my assets, and I'm out of the business, which for me, it's a big deal. This is 45 years of my life. But I also understand one thing. I came here with nothing. Came here making $15,000 a year. This city was amazingly good to me. And as Winston Churchill's famous quote, we make a living by what we get, but we make a life by what we give. And it's my opportunity to give back to the city I love, and that's why I'm doing it.
Allan Domb, thank you. Helen Gym.
Good evening.
Good evening, Helen. There has been a lot of talk tonight about competition, about convincing companies to relocate to Philadelphia, whether they're coming from Boston or San Francisco or Malvern, for that matter. And a lot of people have been asking about tax structure and the BIRT and the wage tax and all of that. So for years, we have been tragically conscious of gun violence in Philadelphia, of street crime in Philadelphia. For whatever reason, and you can argue about the whys and wherefores, this whole crisis has ramped up, not just quantitatively, but almost qualitatively in the last several years. And my view, and I'm not an expert, that's for sure, but my view is that there is a visceral problem with asking companies to relocate to Philadelphia right now because Philadelphia's crime problem has become very much of a public publicly known problem, not just within the city and not just within the region, but throughout the country. What can Philadelphia do? What can the mayor do to put this crime crisis and start contracting it as opposed to expanding it so we can compete economically with other cities?
Yeah, absolutely, and I'm glad that you mentioned that, Jim. Thank you so much. The mayor's job, my job as mayor, is to make sure that every Philadelphian is safe and feels safe. That is very clear. This is a leadership issue. It's one that requires the coordination and integration of multiple different departments. It's one of the reasons why the crime problem is not that easy to fix. You're not just running a bunch of agencies. You're actually pulling a lot of different entities together who are responsible for crime, whether it's making sure that the school district, our SEPTA departments, whether it's federal, state, and local law enforcement working together, the sheriff's department and the district attorney, our prisons, returning, multiple different agencies are accountable to this issue. That's what the mayor has to do. We have $170 million in anti-violence programs without any clear strategy for what actually is supposed to happen. We are clear that we have to solve homicides and non-fatal shootings. We are clear that we have to reduce 911 response times and make sure that anyone who picks up the phone on 911 gets a response within 10 seconds, gets the phone picked up within 10 seconds, and a response within 5 minutes. We've got to make sure that young people who are in the path of violence are actually getting the interventions that they need, because the mayor's job is to provide the housing, the health care, the mental health services, family and education and employment services that actually prevent crime and not just punish it. But I think that that message has to go out loud and clear. It's one of the reasons why our public safety plan is one of the most comprehensive that we've got, and why the mayor will be able to lead on this issue. And I think make assurances to businesses, because this is one of the most serious issues about business attraction.
Would your budget include money to hire more cops?
The budget has 1,300 vacancies right now for police officers. We should fill all the vacancies.
And how do you fill them? Why aren't they filled? How would you fill them?
So among the things, we need to hold certain programs accountable, including a botched program called the Heart and Lung Program, which at one point was 19 individuals, is today almost 600 or so. Maybe it's gone down a little bit since there's been some public amount of shaming about it, but that's very clear. I think we've got to have a good program for how policing works in this 21st century. It's one of the reasons why I've talked about, as we do community policing models and work to get and deploy more foot patrols out into communities, that the mayor needs to be very present and visible with everybody right now. You don't not only want your police officers to see you out there with them as the mayor, but you also want to assure communities that this interaction is going the way we want. We want to make sure that we have new models of community policing where we get our police officers and district captains engaging at the local level with communities so that they can be much more responsive about area hotspots, how they want to see redeployment. Communities experience and need their police officers to do different things. It's not a one-size-fits-all kind of program. And as mayor, I'll help lead that kind of model to be the truly community responsiveness model that I think people want to see and that good police officers want to be part of.
I just asked Allan Domb about a perception, whether it's right or wrong, and I want to ask you about a perception of Helen Gym, whether it's right or wrong. But you know as well as I, better than I, that there's a perception out there that Helen Gym is progressive and anti-development, anti-business. Do you want to respond to that?
I think it's bullshit. And here's why. Because it is ridiculous to say that progressive policies, things that promote the living wage, that support healthy businesses, that support unionization, are automatically by impact going to be anti-business. I think that that is an unhealthy way of looking at how we're going to grow the city, about what we actually need, about how workers desperately need to see their livelihoods rise in a city where we're at $7.25 an hour, whereas New Jersey right now is competing at $15 an hour for starting salaries, starting when you're 16 years old. There has to be the antiquated mindset that pro-worker is anti-business needs to be laid on the trash pile. And we need to go forward because this Philadelphia has to see something bold and transformative, and it's got to both lift up workers and it can make our city prosperous as well. If we take the idea that we're pitting workers against businesses, we all lose. And we've already seen that happen because, in fact, Pennsylvania's business growth and job growth has slowed compared to surrounding areas which actually have higher minimum wages, which have better benefits. We need to be, we want to talk about competition, we want to be competitive for an educated, activated, and excited workforce that wants to stay here in Pennsylvania because they also see opportunity for themselves, not just for the wealthiest CEOs.
Thank you, Helen. Della?
Helen, in a traditional job, typically an employer will put you on your first 90 days and sit down with you for an evaluation. So, as mayor, what would your 90-day evaluation look like, and what would have been your priority that you would have accomplished?
Thank you for that. So I think my first 90 days, obviously, is going to restore the sense of safety and community back to our city. That requires, I said very early on, I do want to be on the ground. I think it's important for a mayor to be visible right now on public safety, to be visible in communities, and I think it's important for our city workforce to see a mayor who's out there being supportive, whether it's on supporting our city workers, being active and engaged on making sure that people feel like their work is really valuable right now. Whether we are delivering water or whether we are doing trash pickups or whether we are policing on the streets. That is incredibly important. Second, it is extremely important that I be evaluated on my ability to deliver a budget to the city of Philadelphia that actually elevates our public school system. One of the biggest problems that I think that this next budget by the mayor, by the 100th mayor, will be the most important budget for our public school system because 99 mayors before me has basically turned their back on our public schools or failed to fulfill their promise. It is time for us to deliver a big budget that the city and that our institutions can buy into. That includes a big effort to modernize our public schools, to make sure that young people have the resources that they need, both after school, during PHL pre-K, that we will continue to fund, summer school programs, and other opportunities. And I absolutely want to make sure that we support teaching and education in the city. We need to get our teachers back in. I will tell you that if I told you that there's a company out there that is having 1,000 jobs at $50,000 a piece, $50,000 to $60,000 a piece, with full benefits, all of us in this room would be doing backflips and somersaults to get that company here. Well, that company is the School District of Philadelphia, out there hiring 1,000 teachers right now, and we need to be doing everything we can to keep those individuals here and active.
Just one final question. As you think about public safety, education, and some of your priorities, are you forming a group of individual CEOs or business or community people that will help guide these policies? Could you tell us what that would look like?
So one of the first things that we'll do is absolutely set around a large stakeholder table. During the work that I did around one of my largest labor bills, Fair Work Week, we had a large 80-person business labor roundtable. It was multiple stakeholders around. It's really important to do that rather than to separate everybody from one another and not hear the different ways in which choices, decisions, and other types of things balance against one another. We had multiple different conversations before we ever introduced a bill. And then after we introduced a bill, we had multiple different conversations to do probably almost 100 different adjustments, amendments, and other types of things to move the bill to completion. That's my approach and attitude when I take on difficult and hard issues. Bringing people together, especially when we face some of the most uncertain and consequential decisions of our lifetime, is not just a skill set, it's a way in which transformation happens. People cannot just go along thinking that their positions are, kind of reduced in an echo chamber. One of the biggest challenges we have is moving Philadelphia out of its silos, having us think so narrowly about the impact on narrow sectors and try to think about what I think should be the primary role of the mayor, to pursue the public interest, what helps get everybody to the table, to raise up prosperity, to excite economic opportunity, and to move the city forward.
Thank you.
Bill? Helen, I'm going to close how I've done with everybody, which is to thank you for your public service in your years. I may get this wrong, so you can correct me if I do. I think you had a recent tweet where you, I think, said, you're not going to run Philadelphia like a business. And so I'm wondering if I'm a business person in Philadelphia, and I'm paying Bert and UNO and real estate taxes. What is my mayor telling me when she says she's not going to run it like a business?
You forgot the second part to it.
Okay, correct me.
So I said I'm running Philadelphia like it's home, and we're all family, and we don't leave anybody behind. The mayor's role is to support the public interest. There's a big difference because taxes aren't just about business interests. They are impactful of business. There is absolutely no question. But the business taxes do fund a whole host of city services that are essential to the running of a business, including safety, including cleanliness, including education and access to a quality workforce, including services that address homelessness, mental health addictions, outreach to communities. This is a diverse and challenging and broad-based challenge that goes out for the mayor. And so the mayor's interest is to balance all of those things. I have made clear that the cities of the future are going to rely on a heavy residential base. We are seeing a massive transformation in cities, that it is not just about large capital towers, corporate towers, if jobs are remote. I need jobs. When I talk about jobs, I need the employees to come live in Philadelphia. In a remote world environment, no matter how much we may want to institute or issue edicts about coming into work, there is a generational shift around COVID. This is not just, or a generational shift around remote work, rather. It's not just about COVID. It's not just a temporal moment in time. There's a generational shift. And thus, if that is the case, I need employees to come live here. So that is why I said I'm here to run Philadelphia like it's home. I want it to be the best place to raise a family, to to afford your first home, to start a business, and to build a future. I think when we make Philadelphia that vibrant, clean, safe place where your children feel good to go to school, we have a fighting chance to be the most competitive city in the country. And I do believe that when we do that, when we make Philadelphia the kind of place that Philadelphians actually want to live in, it will attract more people to our city for generations to come.
I don't want to get into a debate here, but I would just comment. It's curious how the percentage of people who are back in the office can vary fairly significantly. So Philadelphia's in the 40s, but you have cities in America in the 60s, and internationally, there are countries in the 90s. So I'm not sure remote work, just something to think about, is in fact the paradigm shift that is, it's not happening internationally. Taxes, which you just touched on. So we all know the facts, I'm not going to repeat them, about anemic job growth. The city has just underperformed consistently. Do you consider that a factor to the reason we have the high poverty rate? And how do you think about increasing the number of jobs in the city and the interrelationship between that and this, relatively significant tax burden?
So I will say one quick comment. One of the reasons why other nations actually do go back to work is because, one, they have excellent health care. They have a modern health care system, unlike the United States of America. Their poverty rates are much lower than the United States of America, and they have very different work environments in many other parts of the country, many other parts of the world, rather, as well, including like lots of the paid leave and support for families and lots of other different types of things. So I just wanted to say that very quickly. Is the question about poverty or about taxes?
Both. The interrelationship between jobs, poverty, and taxes. Your view on that, yeah.
So my view on poverty is that in a city where almost 37% of children are born into poverty, that this is not a situation that happens by accident. This is a situation, whether intentional or not, is largely manufactured. And it's a large reason why I don't think about poverty in terms of poor people. I think about poverty in this city in terms of impoverished systems that further impoverish people, that they take away wealth, that we over-subsidize wealth, we exploit poverty, and we do lots of things to keep people down. Because I can't imagine another place in the world that would have so many people living in such abject poverty, and then to be sure that if they did, that they would live in substandard housing, that they would have more dangerous neighborhoods, that they would have fewer city services, and that their children were less likely to go to a quality public school. That is a city that impoverishes. That is not a city of poverty. That is a city that impoverishes its own people, and that is a very big difference. And it's why, in my vision of what a mayor needs to do, everything has to be different. It is not the same old practices that we have traditionally done that haven't actually moved the needle on poverty, haven't raised up black and brown economic development or wealth practices, haven't moved the needle on educational practices, and frankly have failed to grow Philadelphia as a city. So for my vision on how things work, I look at the health and well-being of Philadelphia. And I'm looking at it through the lens of what matters the most to people here. We talked about jobs and how we grow them and how we take care of them. I've been very clear and an unabashed supporter of unionization. I believe very strongly that the city had to be proactive about expanding certain labor rights, like a fair work week law, that in a $7.25 an hour state allowed actually people to have advanced work schedules so that people didn't have to worry about whether they could meet their rent or whether they could manage childcare or taking care of an elderly person or even going to college or having a second job. Those types of proactive things are sending a message to some of our largest companies that we need to continue to raise wages, to raise the quality of jobs in this city as we continue to attract new ones. But I'm also very clear, because I think that, Della, you said it very beautifully, is that we do need to invest in a creative new workforce. The jobs of the future don't exist right now. And I think it's very clear that, that we need to spend more time on entrepreneurship, on exciting the creative potential of young people right now who are not that interested in a lot of the jobs that are being promoted and practiced and sold to people, and that we need a lot of opportunities both in our schools, in our Commerce Department, which is what we spend out of our city budget, 0.25% of our funds in our Commerce Department, $15 million out of a $5.9 billion budget. I mean, what kind of economic opportunity are we really thinking for ourselves? Really accelerating and investing in people means delivering that mission out to folks and not just saying, you know, getting the lowest wage possible or replacing people with $85,000 jobs that may not meet the needs of young people right now and where they may not see themselves in economic opportunity. I'm dedicated to making and bridging that gap. And we need a concerted governmental approach to doing that. It's not gonna happen by accident. It's not gonna happen because the market wants it to happen. It's not gonna happen because of the individual dint and hard work of some really extraordinary young people. It's gonna happen because a city leads it, and it starts with the mayor.
Thank you, Ms. Gym. Would the other candidates please join us up here? This might be very interesting because we are going to ask.
I'm missing a chair here.
No, I mean the candidates who took part in the forum tonight. I'm sorry. Forgive me. We are going to ask each candidate to choose another candidate to ask a question to. And we will go in the order that we began these interviews. So, Ms. Quinones-Sanchez, would you choose one of your compatriots here and ask a question of that person?
Sure. And this came as a follow-up to what Della was talking about, to Jeff Brown. As much as I'm very grateful for some of his small business development and others, how many people of color and women have you put on your board of directors? How many people and women of color have you put in your executive suite? Because that's ultimately, when we're having an equity conversation, you're all in. And how much of your purchasing power have you used to grow small businesses in Philadelphia?
Thank you. I think it's a good question. My wife and I run this business, and the overall workforce is about 82% black. In our management team, including executives, are about 50-50 between black and white. As far as the board of directors, I resigned from the business to run for mayor, but it's a board of directors that consists of my wife and my son. And we're not a diverse family. But I would say if you can compare our business to any other entity in the city, including the city itself, there's no one comes close to our diversity. No one.
You didn't answer the purchasing piece. How do you not know who you buy from?
I want to say that our business has something like 50,000 vendors. I have no idea. I don't keep track of who we buy from. Most of the procurement we have is through a cooperative. And the cooperative does business with multinational firms like Procter & Gamble and Lever Brothers, and we don't keep track of it.
Are you satisfied?
No, a city has goals around equity and inclusion, and for someone who wants to run a city with equity and goals, you have to, when people tell you who they are, believe them, which you practice.
Do you have a response to that, Mr. Brown?
My wife's on the Wakefern DEI. I'm on the Convention Center DEI. I've vastly expanded opportunities for people of color. I think my track record on here is a complete strength for almost anyone in this city, including Maria.
Okay. Ms. Rhynhart, it falls to you to ask a question of someone of your choosing.
Anyone, right?
Anyone.
Okay. My question is also going to go to Jeff Brown. Seriously. In August of 2022, the Inquirer wrote an article about a woman named Sharice Ferris who recently became a union carpenter after leaving a dead-end job. The dead-end job was written about in the Inquirer as being at ShopRite Parkside, which is your store, Jeff. Jeff, you make a lot on your campaign about the great paying jobs that you provide people. However, in the Inquirer piece, it stated that she started right above minimum wage, which is $7.25, and that the job maxed out at $13 for a clerk, which 40 hours a week would be about $27,000 a year below the poverty line. So I want to see what your answer to this would be and how you reconcile that with your language on the campaign trail.
First of all, I know her. We're friends. And you're talking about it, someone who worked for us I think more than a decade ago. And I don't even believe the numbers were accurate in the paper. But the most important thing, and this is a key, we've hired 60,000 people in our career. It's often their very first job. If I recall, this young lady also had a criminal record. We're one of the only people in the city that would hire someone with a criminal record. And she started out with a union job with good pay, benefits, and a retirement, and we are proud as hell that she got an even better union job. That's what we've done all along. I think my record's very clear.
I don't think that really answers it, because if someone starts a little over $7.25,
it's not true. $7.25. That's made up.
Well, it was written in the paper. You didn't.
Well, if you want to go by that, a lot of things the Inquirer reports are not correct. But my union has addressed that.
That's a whole different conversation.
That's a whole nother story.
Are you satisfied that you got the answer, a satisfactory answer?
I think it's the best he can do.
Okay. Jeff Brown, your turn to ask a question of whomever you would like.
Yeah, I'm going to ask Helen a question, and I'm going to start out with a compliment. I do respect Helen's passion for education. I just do. I may not do it the same way, but I respect it. But what's not clear to me is, after a person gets done their education, what is the process to help them succeed, to start a business, to get a good paying job? Because that part is not as clear to me.
You're asking me what my plan would be to help a young person succeed after they graduate?
My question is, besides the education itself, how do we help, especially people in poverty, succeed? Become middle-income citizens, live the American dream.
Yeah, well, thank you, Jeff. Actually, I'm very honored to be able to talk about the things that I care the most about. One, I see education as a core area of true opportunity. But I am not just the education candidate, although to be clear, I am the education candidate on this stage. I have been very clear that I've supported housing. I think that I, more than anybody else, has spent a lot of time thinking about how poverty works in Philadelphia, and mostly how it works against people. Number one, I have really focused heavily on housing and making sure that there's stable housing. It's one of the main reasons why I believe the mayor will lead an affordable housing mission here in Philadelphia that must be core and deliver actual affordability, including affordable rents that need to be available and needed for many communities and families. Second, I've long supported a pipeline for jobs, for supports. It's not just about K-12 education. It's also about the fact that we have multiple assets, like a community college that should be providing individuals with opportunities. Not only can city government be a vehicle for restoring back opportunities and jobs. I've got 1 out of 7 jobs open in the city of Philadelphia. I am open for business as a city government, and I want to pull all these young people into our city from our neighborhoods, because these are jobs with benefits that we can attach them onto a community college that gives them additional opportunities, training, and a chance to move on and see true upward mobility. I've always believed in the power of government to make transformational change. It's not the only thing that can be done, but in so many areas where we've allowed private enterprise to just fade away, government should step in and be that delivery of support, services, and opportunity that I think this city needs and deserves.
Mr. Domb, your turn to ask a question.
Thank you. I'd like to address it to Councilmember Maria Quinones-Sanchez. And I'm going to say, Maria, this question, and none of us have talked about this tonight, but it's one of the worst situations in our city, Kensington. And so, and I know that Councilmember Sanchez has been working in Kensington and knows more about it than anyone else. In fact, we put a resolution in council. I put the resolution in co-sponsor with Councilmember Sanchez and Councilmember Squilla, supported by all, including Councilmember Gym, to ask the mayor to declare a special emergency in Kensington, which is a humanitarian crisis. And whether it's me or anyone else here tonight, I want to talk about it because it has to get resolved. It's unacceptable. And so, Maria, if you were mayor, how would you deal with the Kensington crisis from a humanitarian situation, but also how do you re-energize that whole community and bring business back, because we have allowed it to be destroyed?
Thank you for that, and thank you for all the work in elevating the plight of Kensington. Kensington is probably the biggest evidence of structural racism we have in the city of Philadelphia. I grew up in the 80s during the crack epidemic, and we have wrested our way out of it. I went to high school at Mastbaum, so I cut class on Kensington and Allegheny, and I'm not going to tell you we haven't had drugs there forever. However, never in the name of harm reduction and caring for folks do we say we're going to allow this behavior to happen in this zip code when we allow it nowhere else. We don't allow it in South Philly. We don't allow it in the Northeast. We have 3 councilmatic districts that ban methadone clinics and push, right, their communities and their problems into one neighborhood. 80% of the people in Kensington don't live in Kensington, and we need to help them. Kensington civic leaders, and I want to say this with all due respect to everyone running, please do not go tell Kensington leaders and residents what they need. They know what they need. They have a plan that talks about investing in trauma care, investing in housing, investing in employment, and bringing businesses back. What they need, and what Councilman Squilla and I, or all the others who supported what we were doing, was leadership. Standing up with the residents of Kensington and saying no child should have to walk through what happens in Kensington, and it will not happen in any neighborhood, and that we can help people and not traumatize poor Black and brown people while we try to figure it out. Access to health care is hugely important. Our beds go unused every single day. Reuniting families with their loved ones who are in Kensington is hugely important, and we need multi-county cooperation in order to do that. So Kensington has a plan, folks. What they need is a mayor who doesn't go talk at them, but will work with them so they can elevate them and move them forward. Thank you.
Helen Gym, you have a question.
Yes, thank you. So Jeff, you have said that you support raising the wages and support fighting poverty. As chair of the Pennsylvania Restaurant and Lodging Association, that entity lobbied against raising the state minimum wage. You've called Fair Work Week, which was supported by your own union, USCW, and impacts about 130,000 hourly workers across the city of Philadelphia, as bad legislation that you would consider rolling back. Can you make a commitment right now that as mayor you would go to a new Harrisburg with a new governor and a new legislature to fight for a $15 an hour minimum wage and protect Fair Work Week for the citizens of Philadelphia?
So I'll break it down. First, I've never been in the restaurant lodging. I'm a grocer. So I was in Pennsylvania Food Merchants. And Pennsylvania Food Merchants has merchants from all over the state in some very rural, sparsely populated areas. And we could not come to a consensus on what minimum wage made sense. I personally think the minimum wage is incredibly low at $7.25. I have pushed for, in Pennsylvania Food Merchants when I was there, which is many years ago, I pushed for a higher minimum wage, and I've negotiated with both sides of the aisle to try to make progress. I think we really should have a higher minimum wage. As far as Fair Work Week, what I'm concerned about throwing out the baby with the bathwater. New regulations have made this place very uncompetitive, that businesses don't want to come here. And I wonder if we're not manufacturing more poverty by over-regulating our businesses, because we already overtax them, now we over-regulate them. I don't know who wants to come here. And I'm not totally against scheduling, because in my labor contracts, I have scheduling regulations, but this law went beyond our labor contract. And I think it shouldn't be eliminated, but it needs to be looked at, because I would hate to lose good businesses that pay high wages, because they don't want the government telling them how to schedule their employees.
The question was whether you would support a $15 an hour minimum wage and lobby for it at the state level.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. I love it when we have segments where candidates ask questions of each other, because you guys have heard each other talk over a period of months, and so you know just the question to ask that might not occur to us, and it's a valuable tool. Thank you very much. I have a question from a member of the audience, and I guess we'll give everybody a chance to answer this. How will the mayoral candidates deal with the job loss that will be sustained from AI, artificial intelligence, and automation? These new factories and office buildings of the future will not need human labor. This means less jobs. Helen, let's start with you. Ms. Gym.
So what I would say is that we need to lean in on not just taking jobs on autopilot. I mean, this is one of the main reasons why Philadelphia and local governments need to excite new job opportunities at the local level. Gone on its own route, I could very well see how a number of different jobs could be eliminated. But unless we are creative and using our commerce department, our public schools, internships, opportunities, and I think as we had talked about before, the creative spirit, the entrepreneurship to imagine a new economy, we're stuck on autopilot headed towards the future that could eliminate a lot of other different jobs. No city should be on autopilot. A mayor needs to lead a renewed effort to really see opportunity. We talked earlier about gene therapy and about the importance of trying to build an end-to-end type of pipeline, which we could do right here in Philadelphia that could cover GED to PhDs. That is an important opportunity for us to lean in on, but a mayor is going to have to lead that and utilize all assets at our disposal to make it happen.
Ms. Rhynhart.
I think we need to create training programs to prepare for the next generation of learning how to code and how to create artificial intelligence. I mean, the world is moving in the direction that we will have more computerized services. We see it in the grocery store. We see it everywhere. So we need to train our kids and our people in all neighborhoods on that next generation. So as mayor, I would focus in on that, creating good workforce pipelines and good technical training and computer training in the schools.
Ms. Quinones-Sanchez.
Thank you. I think we've seen AI work and can potentially work in advanced manufacturing and others. In other sectors, and the question becomes, what sectors does AI not impact that we can grow? The green economy being one, building out our infrastructure being another. There are jobs in this city that you can never, that you need human capital to do, right? So you gotta lean in on those and then use AI in the advanced manufacturing and other places where hopefully we can draw people in because we have the capacity to build other things. So we gotta be creative, and we have to evolve with the evolving economy and try to create, you know, a critical mass of B Corps and other things, entrepreneurship through B Corps and other places, because the green economy is going to be the future economy and AI can't build it out.
Mr. Brown.
So if you look at history as a guide, people have been afraid about technology and displacing workers from the beginning of time, and the exact opposite has happened. Technology has improved productivity, and improved productivity has resulted in higher wages, new and different jobs, so sometimes you have to retrain. So I'm not afraid of it, but I do have to admit, I'm not a fan of a lot of regulation, but there may be certain industries we do need to have some regulations. Like I'm not comfortable with an 18-wheeler being run by a computer with no one in the cab. I'm just not. So I think there will be a thoughtful evaluation of what does it mean and how do we protect our citizens. And if there is a transition where certain kinds of work goes away, what's our pathway for different kinds of work to pay more to advance society? But I would urge everyone, don't be afraid of it. It's never been a problem. It's always helped us.
Mr. Domb.
You know, I have a different experience in life, so I have a different view of this. I think this is about expanding entrepreneurship more, expanding our life sciences more, or expanding our technology more, and then looking at the tax structure, because that is part of this problem. When Minneapolis has 28 corporate headquarters, and what do we have of the top 20? 3? Not even headquarters. Comcast is a headquarter. We need more employment and employers. That's what we need. And if AI occurs, we should just build it up. You know, the best thing that happened during the pandemic is that we saw demand for employment. TD Bank tellers in 2019 were being paid $10 an hour. Now they're being paid $22. When you increase demand, wages will go up. And we need to increase more demand for jobs.
Jess, do I have time for one more? One more. Oh, boy. Where do each of you stand on the Sixers arena proposal without equivocation? Yay or nay? Helen Gym.
So, I mean, I'm not going to answer it as a yay or nay, just bluntly. So, you know, I've made it very clear. There's a public interest. The city needs to work in the public interest for the livelihood of Philadelphia. Residents are the most important thing that we've got going in the city of Philadelphia. We lose our residents, we have big issues. So We will let that work out as it may, but let me be clear that I'll lead a East Market Street revitalization with or without the Sixers, because those doors don't open until 2032, and I'm not waiting until then.
So let me just ask you a question. You think it's fair to voters that Helen Gym not express any preference on this issue? It's going to be, it is a major issue in this campaign. It is a major potential.
It's a major issue for, let me make this clear. The mayor's job is for the public interest.
Yes.
The Sixers Arena is a private contract, private entity. It may or may not come to fruition. East Market Street is littered with decades of broken promises and $1 billion of taxpayer subsidies that have gone through and been promised over and over again. I'm not going to make the mayor's race about yet another one of those types of potential deals. The mayor is responsible for leading an East Market Street revitalization that brings small businesses and brings that community and that area back to life, and maintaining a strong residential base, which includes Philadelphia Chinatown. A mayor can move things in, including subsidizing small businesses up and down Market Street, who can put working artists to work to bring back our storefronts, and can shut down our streets to bring back weekend festivals and street markets. That's what can happen between now and 2032 if the doors of the 76ers Arena ever even open.
So that sounds like you're not enthusiastically in favor of the Sixers Arena.
I've always been skeptical of that proposal.
Okay. Rebecca Rhynhart.
We don't have all the information yet. What I will say, though, because I don't think we can say yes or no without all the information. And as mayor, I will lead through getting the parties together and getting all the information. I think that it is a very promising proposal. We need to have a lot of questions answered.
Maria Quinones-Sanchez.
I agree. I don't think we have all of the facts in place, but what I have been very public about is that this is a perfect example of our failure to readdress what we've done to communities in the past, and the conversation and the value of Chinatown as a community can be readdressed not only by the ceiling of 676, but the city using the mayor, using their leadership power and saying that rent house should not be sold to the highest bidder, but it should be about making Chinatown whole. So I think we can do both.
Jeff Brown.
Poorest big city in the country. We don't like anything. We don't want to invest anything. We don't want to create any new jobs. We should work to get this done. I'm yay, but I'm committed to solving Chinatown's problems.
Allan Domb.
You know, I think there's a couple of issues. One, as Inga Saffron brought up in the Inquirer on Sunday, the Jefferson train station. And then there's another issue we haven't talked about. That's Jefferson Hospital. The ability to make sure they can get emergency ambulances to and from the hospital. These are issues that have to be worked out. There's issues with Chinatown that have to be worked out. As mayor, I'd call them all together. I saw Sam Katz earlier. Sam knows a lot about financing stadiums and how they work. I would bring Sam Katz to the table, and I'd have everybody at the table, including the Sixers. If it can be accomplished, I think it could be great for the city, but we have to make sure we can get these parties together.
So we would like to thank all the candidates for coming here tonight. I don't know if everybody here understands that these men and women are doing these forums 3-4 nights a week? No. Every night, 5 nights a week. And so while many of us or many of you will see just this forum and you think that this is a unique event for your experience, for these men and women, this has become the way they spend their evenings and their days. But the energy and the enthusiasm and the engagement that you bring to these conversations make it seem like you don't do this every day. And so we appreciate that. This has been edifying, interesting, and boy, has it been worthwhile. Della Clark, Bill Hankowski, thank you. Thank you to Citizen for doing this. What an organization that is, and it's been my honor to be able to participate. And forgive me, but I got to say hi to the streaming 6ABC audience. It's been a while, and nice to see you. Good night, everybody. Thank you.